The moment the spotlight hit me, I knew I was walking into a trap. The audience of 30,000 people sat in absolute silence, waiting to watch me fail. And on that stage, standing next to me with a smirk that could curdle milk, was one of the biggest names in the music industry. He thought he was about to humiliate me. He thought that by forcing me to sing solo in front of a stadium full of people who had paid to see him, he would finally put me in my place. What happened next changed everything. It changed the way the world saw me, and more importantly, it changed the way I saw myself. Stick with me while I share this story. And if it resonates with you, don't forget to support this channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with someone who needs to hear this. My name is Naomi Hartwell, and for as long as I can remember, music has been the only language that made sense to me. I grew up in a small town outside Atlanta, Georgia, in a house where the walls were thin and the dreams were thick. My mother worked double shifts as a nurse, and my father drove a delivery truck 6 days a week. They weren't rich, but they gave me something more valuable than money. They gave me a piano that my father found at a garage sale for $50. It was out of tune and missing 2 keys, but to me it was the most beautiful thing I had ever touched. From the age of 6, I would sit at that piano for hours, picking out melodies that floated through my head like whispers from another world. My mother would come home exhausted from work, but she would sit on the floor beside me and listen. She never told me to be quiet. She never said I was wasting my time. She simply smiled and said I had something special. My father, who worked so hard his hands were always rough and calloused, would sometimes stand in the doorway with tears in his eyes while I sang. He never explained why he cried. He would just wipe his face and say I sounded like an angel. By the time I reached high school, I knew I wanted to pursue music professionally. But in a town where most people worked in factories or farms, that dream seemed almost impossible. My teachers encouraged me to study something practical, something that would guarantee a stable career. I tried to listen to them. I really did. But every time I opened a textbook about accounting or business management, my mind would drift back to melodies and harmonies. Music was not something I chose. It was something that chose me. When I was 17, I auditioned for a local talent competition. The auditorium was small and the crowd was mostly family and friends, but when I opened my mouth to sing, something shifted inside me. I felt like I was flying. I sang a song I had written myself, a simple ballad about finding light in dark places. The audience gave me a standing ovation. The judges, who were local radio personalities, looked at each other with expressions I could not read. I did not win that competition. I came in second place. But something strange happened. A man approached me after the show and handed me his business card. He said he worked with a recording studio in Nashville and that he was interested in hearing more of my music. I was so excited that I could barely breathe. I ran home and told my parents, expecting them to celebrate with me. My mother hugged me and told me she was proud. My father sat down at the kitchen table and asked me a question I still remember to this day. He asked me if I was ready for what came next. I did not fully understand what he meant at the time. I just nodded and said I was ready for anything. Looking back, I realized my father knew something I did not know. He understood that the music industry could be cruel, especially to someone like me. He understood that talent alone was not enough. But he also understood that he could not protect me from everything. So he let me go. I moved to Nashville the summer after I graduated high school. I had saved money from my part-time job at a diner, and I had secured a small apartment in a neighborhood that was not exactly safe, but it was all I could afford. For the first few months I felt lost. I recorded demos. I went to open mic nights. I sent my music to every record label I could find. Most of the time I never heard back. When I did receive a response, it was almost always a polite rejection. They said my voice was good but not marketable. They said I needed to change my sound. They said I needed to lose weight, change my hair, or smile more. I started to doubt myself. I wondered if I had made a mistake by leaving home. I called my mother at least twice a week and she always told me to keep going. She would say that the world was not kind to people who were different, but that did not mean I should stop being myself. Those conversations kept me going when everything else seemed hopeless. Then one night everything changed. I was performing at a small venue in East Nashville, a bar with sticky floors and a sound system that buzzed with static. The crowd was small, maybe 40 people, but I poured my heart into every song. After my set, a woman approached me at the bar. She introduced herself as Vanessa Cross, a talent scout for one of the biggest entertainment companies in the country. She said she had been in the audience by accident, waiting for a friend, but she had been completely captivated by my performance. She asked me if I had representation. I told her I did not. She handed me her card and told me to call her the next morning. I called her. I could not believe what she was offering. She wanted to sign me to a development deal, which meant they would invest in my music, produce my songs, and help me build a career. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. I signed the contract without reading every line. I trusted her. I thought this was my moment. And for a while it seemed like it was. The first few months of my new career were amazing. I recorded my debut single in a professional studio for the first time. I met producers, musicians, and other artists who seemed genuinely passionate about their work. I was assigned a manager named Derek who was supposed to guide me through the industry. Derek was a white man in his mid-40s with perfect hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He told me I was talented but that I needed to work on. First I thought he meant well. I told him I was open to feedback. He suggested I change my style, wear more revealing clothes, and adopt a more aggressive attitude. He said the music industry favored women who were bold and provocative. I tried to follow his advice but it never felt right. Every time I performed in a tight dress or sang lyrics that did not reflect who I was, I felt like I was betraying myself. Derek also introduced me to Gavin Sterling. Gavin was one of the biggest pop stars in the world at that time. He had sold millions of albums, won countless awards, and dated some of the most famous women in Hollywood. He was known for his arrogance as much as his talent. But he also had influence, and Derek believed that collaborating with Gavin could launch my career to the next level. Our first meeting was in Gavin's penthouse apartment in downtown Nashville. The place was enormous, filled with expensive art and designer furniture. Gavin sat on a leather couch with his feet up on a glass coffee table. He did not stand when I walked in. He did not introduce himself. He just looked me up and down and said, "So you're the one Vanessa found at that dive bar?" I nodded and introduced myself. He waved his hand dismissively and said he had heard my single. He said it was decent but not great. He said I had potential, but I needed to be coached by someone who really understood the industry. He made it clear that he was doing me a favor by even agreeing to meet with me. I swallowed my pride and thanked him for his time. I told him I was eager to learn and willing to work hard. Gavin smirked and said that hard work was not enough. He said the industry was about connections and he was the connection I needed. He offered to feature me on one of his upcoming songs. He said it would give me exposure and credibility. I was grateful for the offer, even though something about his demeanor made me uncomfortable. I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. I told myself that successful people were often intense and I needed to learn how to handle it. The first recording session with Gavin was a disaster. He arrived 2 hours late and blamed traffic. He spent the first 30 minutes on his phone, ignoring me completely. When he finally decided to work, he barely looked at me. He instructed the producer to make adjustments to my vocals. Smoothing out the rough edges, he said, made me sound unprofessional. He told me to sing with less emotion, to hold back because I was overpowering the track. I did what he asked, even though every instinct told me I was losing what made my voice special. When we finished the session, Gavin patted me on the shoulder and said I was not terrible. He said it like it was a compliment. I thanked him and left the studio feeling empty. I called my mother that night and told her I was struggling. She listened quietly and then said something that stuck with me. She said that when you are climbing a mountain, you should never let anyone convince you to cut off your own feet to make the climb easier. Over the next few months, I continued working with Gavin and his team. The collaboration was supposed to elevate my career, but instead, it felt like I was slowly being erased. Gavin's team controlled everything from the songs I wrote to the clothes I wore to the way I spoke in interviews. They made me perform covers of Gavin's old hits instead of my original music. They put me on stage as an opening act, where the crowd was often hostile or disinterested. They told me it was about building my brand, but I knew what was really happening. I was being used. Gavin's record label was using my talent to bring attention to his projects. They marketed me as the young, unknown artist he had discovered. They framed my story as a Cinderella narrative, the overlooked girl who was saved by a generous star. They never mentioned that I had already been writing my own songs for years. They never mentioned that I had already performed in front of hundreds of people. They made it seem like Gavin had created me. I tried to address these concerns with Derek. He dismissed my feelings and told me I was overthinking. He said I should be grateful for the opportunities one was receiving. He reminded me that many aspiring artists would kill to be in my position. He said I needed to be patient and trust the process. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that everything would work out. But something kept gnawing at me. The breaking point came during a live show in Los Angeles. It was one of the biggest performances of my career up to that point. The arena was packed with fans who had come to see Gavin. I was scheduled to perform a duet with him, one of the songs we had recorded together. I had practiced for weeks. I had prepared myself mentally and emotionally. But as we stood backstage waiting for our cue, Gavin leaned close to me and whispered something that made my blood run cold. He said, "Tonight I want you to sing the whole song by yourself. I'm going to step back and let the audience hear what you've got." I stared at him in disbelief. The song was built around his vocals. His fans came to hear him. If I performed alone, I would be standing in front of 30,000 people who did not know my name, holding a microphone and trying to fill the silence that Gavin was about to leave behind. This was not a gesture of support. This was a public execution. I tried to protest, but he just smiled and patted my shoulder. He said it would be good for me. He said it would test my character. He walked on stage to thunderous applause, and I followed behind him like a lamb being led to slaughter. The first part of the song went according to plan. Gavin sang his verses and the crowd sang along with him. I harmonized when I was supposed to, trying to keep my voice steady even though my heart was pounding in my chest. Then came the bridge. Gavin took a step back, turned to the audience and gestured toward me. He said, "I want to give a special moment to someone who has been working so hard. Everyone give it up for Naomi." The applause was polite but uncertain. The audience was waiting for Gavin to take back control. They were waiting for him to step forward and reclaim the spotlight. But he did not. He crossed his arms and nodded at me, signaling for me to start. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw people whispering to each other, looking confused. I saw a few people holding up their phones, probably recording what they expected to be a humiliating failure. I took a deep breath and I started to sing. The opening notes of the bridge floated out of my mouth. At first my voice was shaky. I could feel the fear gripping my chest, making it hard to breathe. But then something happened. I closed my eyes and I let go of everything. I stopped thinking about the crowd. I stopped thinking about Gavin. I stopped thinking about what everyone expected from me. I just sang. And the notes that came out of my mouth were not the simple, controlled vocals that Gavin's team had been forcing me to produce. They were powerful. They were raw. They were filled with the pain, the hope, the frustration, and the determination that had carried me through every struggle of my life. I hit a note so pure and so high that the sound seemed to vibrate through the entire arena. The audience went silent. I mean completely silent. The kind of silence that feels louder than screaming. For a moment I thought I had ruined everything. I thought they were stunned by how bad I sounded. But then something incredible happened. People started cheering. They stood up from their seats one by one and the applause spread like wildfire. I looked out at the crowd and saw people crying. I saw people holding up their hands in surrender, as if they had been conquered by the sound of my voice. I saw disbelief and admiration in equal measure. I looked over at Gavin. His smirk had completely vanished. His face was pale and his eyes were wide with shock. He had been so certain that I would fail. He had been so sure that exposing me to his audience would destroy my confidence and prove that I was nothing without him. But the opposite happened. I had just done something he could never do. I had connected with a crowd in a way that went beyond performance. I had revealed the truth about who I was. When the song finally ended, the applause continued for what felt like an eternity. I stood on that stage, breathing heavily, tears streaming down my face, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. I felt free. Backstage, everything was chaos. Gavin locked himself in his dressing room and refused to speak to anyone. His team was scrambling, trying to figure out how to control the narrative. They knew that what had just happened was not part of the plan. The narrative they had carefully constructed was beginning to crumble. I sat alone in a corner, still trembling from the adrenaline. Derek approached me looking furious. He grabbed my arm and pulled me into a private room. He told me I had disobeyed instructions. He said that my performance was disruptive and unprofessional. He said that I had made Gavin look bad and that was unacceptable. I pulled my arm away from him and said something I had been holding back for months. I said, "I made myself look good. That is not a crime." Derek's face turned red with anger. He threatened to terminate my contract. He said I would never work in the industry again. I looked at him calmly and told him I was no longer afraid of his threats. I told him that I had spent my whole life being afraid, being careful, being small, and I was done. I walked out of that room and I have never looked back. In the days that followed, the video of my solo performance went viral. Millions of people watched it and shared it. People praised my voice and my courage. The media called me the woman who silenced a superstar. Gavin's team tried to spin the story, claiming that he had orchestrated the moment to showcase my talent. But the footage did not lie. The look of shock on his face was impossible to miss. The audience's reaction told the real story. I received offers from other record labels, producers, and managers. For the first time in my career, I had the power to choose who I wanted to work with. I declined every offer that came with strings attached. I decided to produce my own music on my own terms. I wrote songs that reflected my truth, songs about resilience, identity, and self-worth. I recorded them in a studio where I was treated with respect. I hired a team of women who believed in me and supported my vision. The album I released 6 months later was called Unsilenced. It debuted at #1 on the charts. Critics called it one of the most powerful albums of the decade. Fans around the world connected with the music because it was honest. It was not manufactured. It was not controlled by executives who wanted to shape me into something I was not. Gavin's career suffered a significant blow after that night. His reputation for arrogance and bullying had already been whispered about in the industry, but my story brought those rumors into the public eye. Other artists came forward with similar experiences. He eventually issued a public apology, but the damage was done. He faded from the spotlight, releasing music that never quite captured the success he once had. I did not celebrate his downfall. I did not feel satisfaction from watching him struggle. But I did feel a sense of peace, knowing that I had survived something that was designed to break me. I had not only survived, I had thrived. Looking back on that moment on stage, I realized that it was never really about Gavin. It was about me. It was about the moment I chose to stop letting other people define my worth. It was about the moment I decided to trust my own voice, even when the entire world seemed to be telling me I was not good enough. I received a letter from my mother a few weeks after the album was released. She said she had watched the video of that performance dozens of times. She said she had cried every time. She said she had always known I was capable of something extraordinary, but she never imagined the whole world would finally see it too. I also received a letter from my father. He wrote that the old, out-of-tune piano he had bought for $50 had been sitting in the corner of his living room for years, gathering dust. He said that after seeing my performance, he had finally decided to donate it to a local school. He wanted other children with big dreams and small budgets to have the same chance I had been given. He did not want the piano to be wasted, hidden away in a house where no one played it anymore. I smiled when I read that letter. I understood what he was really saying. He was saying that dreams were not meant to be kept in hiding. Dreams were meant to be shared with the world, no matter how imperfect the vessel. A few months later, I returned to my hometown for a charity concert. I performed in the same auditorium where I had competed in that talent competition years earlier. The place had not changed much. The seats were still old and worn. The stage was still creaky. But I was different. I walked onto that stage not as a nervous teenager hoping for approval, but as a woman who had earned her place in the world. I looked out at the audience and saw familiar faces. My mother was in the front row, crying like she always did. My father was beside her, holding her hand. My old teachers were there. The neighbors who had watched me grow up were there. I sang my heart out, not for the fame, not for the money, but for the joy of making music. When I finished my last song, the audience gave me a standing ovation that seemed to shake the entire building. After the show, a young girl approached me. She could not have been more than 12 years old. She had a notebook in her hands and tears in her eyes. She said she had been watching me since that viral video. She said she wanted to be a singer too, but she was scared. She was scared of being judged. She was scared of being laughed at. She was scared of failing. I knelt down so I could look her in the eyes. I told her that fear was normal. I told her that everyone who has ever achieved anything meaningful has felt fear. But I also told her that courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was the decision to keep going despite the fear. I told her to never let anyone convince her that she was not enough. I told her that her voice was a gift, not for the approval of others, but for her own self-expression. I told her that the world needed her music even if the world did not know it yet. She smiled and hugged me tightly. When she pulled away, I saw something in her eyes. I saw the same spark I had felt when I was her age. The spark that said she was meant for something bigger than the world would ever expect. As I walked away, I thought about the journey that had brought me to that moment. I thought about the struggles, the betrayals, the moments of doubt, and the moments of triumph. I thought about the people who had lifted me up and the people who had tried to tear me down. I realized that every setback had taught me something important. Every failure had prepared me for the success that followed. Every pain had made me stronger. The music industry is filled with stories of exploitation and injustice. It is an industry that often values appearance over substance and profits over people. But it is also an industry where genuine talent can eventually shine through, no matter how many obstacles are placed in its way. My story is not unique. There are countless artists who have been silenced, marginalized, or exploited. There are countless women who have been told they are not enough. There are countless people of color who have been made to feel invisible. But I also believe that there is power in telling our stories. There is power in speaking truth to power. There is power in refusing to stay silent. When Gavin forced me to sing solo that night, he thought he was exposing my weakness. Instead, he exposed my strength. He thought he was humiliating me. Instead, he gave me the platform I needed to prove myself. He thought he was ending my career. Instead, he was the one who fell. I do not believe in revenge. I believe in karma. I believe that what you put into the world will eventually come back to you. I believe that kindness, honesty, and hard work are rewarded, not always immediately but eventually. I also believe in forgiveness. I have forgiven Gavin not because he deserves it, but because holding on to anger would only hurt me. I have forgiven the people who doubted me because their doubts were never really about me. They were about their own limitations. But forgiving someone does not mean forgetting what they did. It does not mean allowing them to hurt you again. It means releasing the burden of resentment and moving forward with your life. I have built a new life for myself, one where I am surrounded by people who respect me and support me. I have a team that values my creative vision. I have fans who appreciate my authenticity. I have a family that believes in me. I still talk to my mother every day. She is my biggest cheerleader and my most honest critic. She still tells me that I sound like an angel even when I know I am having an off day. My father still cries when I sing and I still pretend not to notice. I also mentor young artists, especially young women and people of color who are trying to break into the music industry. I want to be the mentor that I never had. I want to tell them the things that no one told me. I want to warn them about the pitfalls and guide them toward the paths that lead to genuine success. I tell them to read every contract carefully. I tell them to trust their instincts when something feels wrong. I tell them to never compromise their integrity for the sake of a deal. I tell them to build networks of support and to always have someone in their corner who will tell them the truth. I also tell them to embrace their uniqueness. The things that make you different are the things that will make you stand out. The industry may try to mold you into something predictable, but the world craves authenticity. Do not let anyone erase your identity in exchange for fame. The night that changed my life was not the night I sang solo in front of 30,000 people. It was the night I decided to stop letting others define me. It was the night I realized that my voice mattered not because someone else validated it but because I owned it. I have often wondered what would have happened if I had failed that night. What if my voice had cracked? What if the audience had laughed at me? What if Gavin's plan had worked? I think about those questions sometimes, and I realize that even if I had failed, I would have still found a way forward. Failure was never the end. It was always just another beginning. There is a quote that I keep close to my heart. It says, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." I have stumbled many times in my life. I have made mistakes. I have faced rejections. But I have never stopped moving forward. The music I create now is more honest than ever. I write about love and loss. I write about resilience and hope. I write about the experiences that have shaped me into the person I am today. Each song is a piece of my story and I share it freely with the world. I think about that young girl who approached me after the charity concert. I think about the spark in her eyes and the notebook in her hands. I hope she is still writing songs. I hope she is still singing. I hope she remembers the words I said to her. I told her that courage was the decision to keep going despite the fear. I hope she has found that courage. I hope she knows that she is enough exactly as she is. The world can be a harsh place, especially for those who are different. But the world also has a way of rewarding those who stay true to themselves. The voices that are silenced are often the voices that need to be heard the most. I used to believe that success meant fitting in. I used to believe that I needed to change who I was to be accepted. I was wrong. True success is about standing out. It is about being so authentically yourself that you become impossible to ignore. When I think about Gavin now, I do not feel anger. I feel pity. He was so consumed by his own ego that he could not see the talent in front of him. He was so afraid of being overshadowed that he tried to destroy someone who could have been his greatest collaborator. He chose competition over connection, and that choice ultimately cost him everything. I have learned that competition is an illusion. There is room for everyone to succeed. The success of others does not diminish your own. When you lift others up, you lift yourself up. I choose to lift others up now. I use my platform to amplify voices that have been silenced. I collaborate with artists from all backgrounds. I support causes that matter to me, especially those that promote equality and justice in the music industry. The music industry is slowly changing. More women are taking leadership roles. More people of color are being recognized for their contributions. There is a growing demand for diversity and inclusion. But the change is not happening fast enough and there is still much work to be done. I am committed to being part of that change. I want to create opportunities for artists who have been overlooked. I want to challenge the systems that have perpetuated inequality. I want to be a voice for those who have not yet found their own. My journey from a small town outside Atlanta to the biggest stages in the world has been long and difficult. There were times when I wanted to give up. There were times when I felt like I was fighting a losing battle. But I kept going because giving up would have meant letting the people who doubted me win. And I refused to let them win. I am Naomi Hartwell. I am a singer. I am a songwriter. I am a survivor. I am proof that talent, persistence, and self-belief can overcome even the most daunting obstacles. The night I sang solo and hit notes that Gavin never could, I was not trying to prove anything to him. I was proving something to myself. I was proving that I had always had what it takes. I had just been too afraid to claim it. But that night I claimed it. I claimed my voice. I claimed my power. I claimed my place in the world. And I have never looked back. Now when I stand on a stage and look out at a sea of faces, I do not see a crowd waiting to judge me. I see a community of people who have come to share a moment with me. I see people who have their own stories, their own struggles, their own victories. I see myself reflected in their eyes. Music is a universal language. It connects people across cultures, borders, and generations. It heals wounds that words cannot reach. It gives voice to feelings that are too deep for speech. I am grateful that I get to be part of that healing. I am grateful that I get to share my voice with the world. I am grateful for every moment that led me to where I am today. And I will continue to sing not because I seek approval but because it is who I am. Because music is not something I do. It is something I am. So if you ever feel like you are not enough, if you ever feel like the world is against you, if you ever feel like giving up, remember my story. Remember the girl who walked onto a stage expecting to be humiliated and walked off as a star. You have a voice. You have power. You have a story that deserves to be heard. Do not let anyone silence you. Sing your heart out. Hit notes that no one else can. And watch the world change around you. Because the voices that are loudest are not always the ones that matter. Sometimes it is the quietest voices, the ones that have been silenced for too long, that have the most to say. I found my voice on a stage in Los Angeles, in front of 30,000 people who had come to see someone else. And I will never lose it again. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of resilience and triumph. And never forget that your voice matters, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. I am Naomi Hartwell and this is my testimony.